let's start with one of the stories that you've discussed in your this week in Politify, which is Turning Point USA. And you discuss some of the tax documents there. So this
Right.
is a conservative think tank that was
Mm-hmm.
started by Charlie Kirk, and I'm sure some people know who Charlie Kirk is. But for people who don't know, he's a radio talk show host and he's a political YouTube commentator. He's a Trump loyalist. He raised millions of dollars from unknown donors, and Robbie Yeager breaks down the details of that in his Substack. So, what can you tell us about that here on this show about your findings, Robbie?
I mean, look, well, I also reposted just specifically that story. I was also on Rockfin. I reposted it a couple of days later because I do feel like everybody should be able to read it. So it launched in Politify, but no, I mean, this is kind of this is a scoop. I mean, quite honestly, nobody else has reported any of this yet. As far as I know, we over here at MCSC are the first ones to actually even report, or for all I could know of, even look at Turning Point USA's 2020 tax documents. And yes, I mean, Charlie Kirk is the guy. He's he's the guy that most recently, basically said he was one of the Juneteenth attackers, basically saying, since Juneteenth is now a holiday, it diminishes 4th of July or whatever kind of nonsense the conservative talking point was to there. He's a hardcore Trump loyalist, as you mentioned. In my opinion, he's the king of the whataboutism. Nobody can
more than Ben Shapiro. Oh my god!
Oh no, yeah, absolutely better than Ben Shapiro. No, Charlie Kirk is the king of whataboutism. And he's just an overall a goon. But but regardless of that, he's made quite a bit of a name of himself, especially because of his social media presence, for one, and his massive whataboutisms that he spouts on there, and nothing gets retweets like whataboutisms in this day and age. But he's also he has the think tank, right? The Turning Point USA. He says it's about reaching out to students and teaching them about the free economy. What does it tax documents actually say? Sorry, I've got my phone out here. Turning Point USA educates students about the importance of fiscal responsibility, free markets, and capitalism through nonpartisan debate, dialogue, and discussion. Through nonpartisan debate, dialogue, and discussion. Turning Point USA believes that every young person can be enlightened to true free market values. Okay, so I mean, they're already bullshitting you, from out the gate, because there's nothing nonpartisan about Turning Point USA. It's definitely partisan. They definitely hate Democrats. But so what's the big deal? What's the tax documents have to say? What's the juice? So their fiscal year runs from the beginning of July through June the next year. Excuse me. So these numbers run from July 2019 to through the end of June of 2020, and during that time they raised just a few hundred thousand off of $40 million. So about $39,345,000 to be exact, which is about $17 million more than they had made the previous year. Which, is pretty daggone good. Especially for an organization that's only been around like 5 years. You're already pulling in 40 million a year. That's pretty good. But also the fact that, of course, like most of these think tanks, nobody has nobody knows who the actual donors are, because of course they don't disclose them. And even though we've done some digging, we still haven't been able to actually put any names on these donors, or any significant names on any significant donors so far. But we do know that $10 million out of the roughly 40 that they brought in that time frame came from a winter 2019 fundraiser that they actually held at Mar-a-Lago that featured none other than Donald Trump Jr., of course, his partner at the time, I'm not sure if they're still together, Kimberly Guilfoyle, and they also a few other, Mark Levin, I believe, was there, and a few other conservative commentators and internet personalities. Brought in $10 million and I think $10.5 million in one night. from, again, anonymous sources, so we don't know. I've been able to track down another 1.4 million coming from the Charles Schwab Charitable Fund, which is a donor advised fund. Basically, you give them your money. It counts as a donation to you, but what you're really doing is putting it in kind of a savings account. And you don't even have to donate to a charity that year. It could sit for years until you decide that you know where you actually want to donate your money. So it's kind of a pooled investment, you know. So there's really and they never have to disclose the donors, so we don't know where that other 1.4 million came from. But other than that, we don't really know who's funding, or at least we don't really know who funded them last year. We just know that they just made a shit ton more money than they did the year before, and that it came from pushing that connection to Trump, you know, that proximity to Trump at Mar-a-Lago with Trump Jr. You know, it's easy to see how you bring the big donors out for that.
Yeah, and they claim to be nonpartisan, right? So what they mean is like that they should be receiving donations or have money ties with corporations that are Republican simps or Democrat simps. But then, like you mentioned, like that they have ties to PragerU, Colorado Christian University, American Conservative Union. Like these are just you know, Republican simping corporations, right?
Oh, so what's so great about this in particular is that, you know, we've gone over where the money came from, right? Or what we know. So now we get to where did Turning Point spend their money? And they spent roughly, what's to say, just under $17 million, or maybe it was just over. So yeah, they just spent just over $17 million, 17.25 million. But $15 million of that in straight cash was sent to their own endowment fund, right? Turning Point USA has a separate nonprofit entity that is just basically an investment vehicle for Turning Point USA. It's their endowment, right? The description of the endowment is, you know, I'm paraphrasing, is basically to ensure the long-term, you know, the long-term financial stability and vitality of Turning Point USA. So basically, they take this money, they invest it in the market, they buy land, they buy buildings, stuff like that. Turning Point USA's headquarters in Arizona is the deed or the registry, you know, has Turning Point's endowment as the actual owner of the property. So that's what that all kind of does. $15 million just boom cashed over there. They also sent them like $1.74 million, I think, in, or 1.64, something like that, in commercial real estate. So almost all the money that they gave out, like nearly all of it, went straight to themselves. Basically, they took, you know, they just basically invested all this money into themselves. Not very much money went anywhere else, especially to, like they said, they're trying to reach students. I think they spent just over $200,000 on student related activities, as far as like programs that they themselves ran. They spent $150,000 on PragerU, which was their like, next to themselves, with the billions of dollars that they transferred themselves. The $150K to PragerU was the biggest grant they made to any other organizations. And then, of course, the other two that you mentioned were in like the $20,000 range. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of when people talk about the grift. I mean, you raise 40 million and you pay yourself 17. You you know, you Charlie Kirk himself made $327,000 last year to talk the crazy shit that he talks. You know, it's quite insane. But what's even better about this is that we kind of get this again, the uniparty thing here. You know, for a few years it was like you saw trolls online, right? You saw the bot armies. You know, the go-to was, oh, you work for David Brock now, or you must be one of those correct the record trolls. Well, it turns out, and now this part we already knew, or it had already been reported by the Washington Post. I feel like October of last year, they had reported that Turning Point was linked to a company called Rally Forge, which apparently had been running fake accounts on both Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. in kind of coordinated fashion that were all kind of spitting Turning Point USA talking points like verbatim. And then it turns out that Turning Point was actually paying them to do that, and like 500 and some odd accounts from across all those social media platforms were all banned for deceptive practices and misleading, and basically all the happy horse shit that that tech companies like suspending for. But there literally was a coordinated effort that Turning Point was paying for, and we knew from the FEC records that their PAC, Turning Point Action, had spent a roughly like just under $1 million during the 2020 election at that company in question, Rally Forge. And then we found from these tax records that Turning Point's nonprofit paid that same company $531,000 during that same time span. So again, that's the misinformation machine at work. And it's showing you right there. I mean, they're spending nonprofit dollars on basically lying to you online, but they're not just coming out and say, hey, this is paid for by Turning Point USA, or saying, no, my name is, John Smith. This is me. This is what I really believe, but I'm not disclosing to you that, hey, I'm actually being paid basically by a proxy of Turning Point to say this type of stuff, which that's how dark money. That's one of the many ways dark money influences our election, and people kind of just look at it as like dark money for super PACs and stuff like that. But I mean, nowadays super PACs are more than just the very annoying constant commercials you see in the run up to election season. Now it could be one of your favorite followers. I mean, or one of the people you follow that you really agree with could be on the payroll of a super PAC, and you may never know, or be on the payroll of some dark money organization, and you may never know. I mean, because that's the whole point. It's subversion.
It's so creepy also how they're focusing on students. Charlie Kirk is also like his audience is going to be a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, right? So they're trying to mold this new generation into being these these people that believe these State Department talking points, that believe in these China fear mongering messages, right? I just wanted to point that out. And also, I just want to make it clear to everybody: is it individuals or is it corporations that are donating to Turning Point USA?
It's a good guess. I mean, they don't give you any names. I mean, it could have just been one person at that fundraiser in Mar-a-Lago put down 10 million. We saw it happen multiple times during the election, not at Turning Point, but in other organizations. There are people in DC circles that definitely have the ammo to slap 10 million on the table at any given point in time. But again, they don't disclose anything. I've been cross-referencing other publicly available tax returns from the same time period. And like I said, other than the 1.4 million, that's also anonymous and will always be, it'll stay that way. We haven't found anything significant from anywhere else. And when I say significant, I mean, like, you're talking about a $40 million organization. I'm looking for a donation of at least 6 figures, or you give me like $250,000 or more. I mean, I'm not going to report on you made 40 million if I find 10 grand from somewhere. I'm looking for where the big money is, or at least the considerable money is. So as far as that goes, we haven't really found anything notable as far as where the money is actually coming from. There has been past reports done where you can kind of see, I think somebody found 43% of their donors between 2014 and 2018, but that's not going to do you much good now. There are still some tax returns that could clue us in. We're still waiting on the returns from a few different conservative organizations. We're still waiting on the returns from the largest donor advised for fund in the country. It moves nearly $10 billion through it every single year. That's the Fidelity Charitable Fund. Look, their last year's tax returns, they gave $83 million to one of the largest liberal dark money outfits out there. So look, these donor advised funds, quite honestly, are the next frontier in dark money. That, I mean, it's already here. It's not really the next frontier. It's just the frontier that people have. It's the new avenue because it gets around literally every piece of legislation that would force you to disclose your identity. Even if they would have passed For the People Act, donor advised funds would still have been good to go. They still wouldn't have had to say anything. So that they're like, it's the ultimate loophole, but we're still waiting on that to come in because we may still yet see some big numbers out of there. But the thing about here's the thing about tax reporting with dark money stuff. It's almost impossible without a source that will actually dig through the personal records, the private records of a group and send you the information. It's almost impossible to find individuals who donate. And that includes corporations because that's how the government sees corporations, as individuals. Though it's the easier part is when it's another nonprofit donating to the group, because whereas nonprofits, even dark money groups, don't have to disclose where their money comes from, almost every nonprofit has to disclose where they spent their money. So you can cross-reference certain tax returns and say, okay, well, you might not have told me where you got your money, but this nonprofit's tax return said that they donated $1 million to you. So I just found $1 million in dark money that we can check off the list, right? We put a light on that. Sometimes it's easier, right, when you're getting a lot of institutional donations. But it looks like in Turning Point's case, most of their money is coming from individuals, in which case it'll remain secret forever unless somebody decides to blow the whistle on where it came from.